Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Okay, so we're going to get this show on the road. Jesse Schell was unable to make the plane trip over. So we've got a more or less working configuration now with him on the phone, just for the moment, but then he'll be presenting for us. So Jesse Schell has taught game design and research projects at Carnegie Mellon's Entertainment and Technology Center since 2002. Jesse is also CEO of Pittsburgh's largest video game studio, Schell Games, and the former chairman of the International Game Developers Association. In 2004, he was named one of the world's top 100 young innovators by Technology Review, MIT's magazine of innovation. Before coming to Carnegie Mellon, he was the creative director of the Disney Virtual Reality Studio, where he spent 7 years as a designer, programmer, and manager on several projects for Disney theme parks and Disney Online. Before that, he was a software engineer at IBM and Bell Communications Research, and writer, director, performer, juggler, comedian, and circus artist for both Freyhofer's Mime Circus and the Jugglers Guild. And today he's going to talk about how the future is beautiful. So without any more ado, I welcome Jesse Schell.
Hi, everybody. You got my slides up okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm just going to jump in here. I apologize I couldn't be here in person. I'm a little under the weather today, and I wasn't quite ready to travel. But I was glad I was able to participate this way. So what I want to talk about today is about some trends that I've been seeing. And you got a pretty good sense of my background there, but just to clarify some of it, right? Some of my big experience was at Disney Imagineering. Currently, I'm teaching at the Carnegie Mellon Entertainment Technology Center, which has been an absolutely great experience. I've been there about 8 years, and I'll cite some examples from things that I learned while I was there. And in addition, I run a game studio, Schell Games. We have about a little more than 50 staff, and we do all kinds of different projects, from interactive theme park rides to online massively multiplayer video games, all kinds of things. And I wrote a book called The Art of Game Design. Anyway, so like all these things are the sorts of things that get me kind of looking at what's going on in the world. And one of the things I couldn't help but notice is how the world has just been getting so much more beautiful. Things have just been getting so incredibly beautiful and incredibly pretty in the 21st century. The 21st century has been very different than the 20th century in that regard. And I'm going to go through a number of examples today about that and how it pertains to the future of education. So I guess, in a sense, I sort of see four main trends. The first one is this sort of trend of beauty, and how so many of our products and so many things that we just encounter in our everyday life have become so much more beautiful than they used to be. It used to be something like a telephone you just considered a utilitarian object, and whether it was pretty or not really didn't matter. But when you hear people talk about using the iPhone, they keep talking about what a wonderful experience it is to use it and to hold it and to look at it, and they get excited just about the experience of using it. It ends up being the way people make their product decisions now. And we see it everywhere. You go to the grocery store and you look at something as simple as shampoo bottles. You know, when shampoo bottles 20 years ago were all they all looked a lot the same, but now they've gotten all artsy and swoopy, and they have all different shapes. Or toothbrushes is another good example. You know, I remember when I was a kid, they came in, 3 colors and one shape, and now you go to buy a toothbrush at the grocery store, and it's like looking at an aquarium full of tropical fish. There's just something in the air where we like things becoming more and more beautiful. A second trend that's definitely happening is a trend towards customization. We see it in our video games. It used to be, you got the video game character you got, but now we fully expect that you're able to create your own video game character that's the way you want it. You're able to customize your game, and if not just your game, maybe your whole world. And this is happening in all kinds of areas, not just not just in video games. We're seeing it everywhere. You can go to the M&M's website and customize your M&M's, get anything you want printed on them, get your own picture printed on them. People are looking for this customization in almost every facet of everything they interact with. And a third trend is a trend of sharing. Wikipedia is a wonderful example of this. I remember when I first heard about Wikipedia, and I thought it was just the worst idea I'd ever heard. The idea that everyone can edit the encyclopedia and somehow the encyclopedia will get better. I assumed that no, the encyclopedia is going to end up a big, messy, just bunch of junk that no one's going to want to look at anymore. But it turns out that managed properly, it can turn into something quite wonderful, and in fact it's quite arguable that Wikipedia is at this point the greatest accomplishment of humanity. And it's not just Wikipedia. There's something, people like sharing. People have always liked sharing, but there's something going on now where people are really excited about sharing. You see music sharing and the things that people are sharing on websites, and a lot of what's going on with Twitter and Facebook is all about people wanting to share things. So there's this kind of sort of fun feeling of people just wanting to share content with each other. And then the fourth one, the last one I was going to talk about is this aspect of reality. These two guys, Gilmore and Pine, had written a book called The Experience Economy a few years back, where they argued that the products are fundamentally changing. The way people interact with what they want is changing, and that no longer is it about which product is cheapest, which product is the most efficient. Instead, it's now about the experience that these products deliver. And they followed that book up with this new book called Authenticity, where they argue that the most important of those experiences, the ones that people are now demanding the most, is an experience of authenticity, interacting with the thing that feels real. And ever since I saw this, I was very curious to read this book, and after I read it, I could see it absolutely everywhere. You go to Wendy's, and their slogan is, "You know when it's real." Just last night, I watched a Domino's commercial, Domino's Pizza, right? Which I never think of that as really great, authentic pizza. I think of it as kind of, it's sort of the cheap pizza, right? And their ad is, you know what? We're done with these fancy food photographers and their fancy food photography tricks. From now on, we're just gonna take regular photos of our food, completely authentic, and more than that, we're going to turn it over to you, the people who like our pizza. We're going to let you take pictures of our pizza and make a big contest out of it. Who wants to? And they're going to put hundreds and hundreds of pictures that people take. So they're getting simultaneously customization and authenticity sort of rolled together, and sharing on top of that. So if this is how the 21st century is shaping up, that everything's going to be beautiful, customized, shared, and real, that's pretty great. Who can complain about that? That looks really good. And of course, if it's happening, out in popular culture and it's happening in the world of products, of course it's going to be happening also in the classroom, right? Right? Well, maybe not really, right? Because when you think about the classroom, is it beautiful, and is it shared, and is it real? Is it all these things? Well, so there's the first question. Is it beautiful in the classroom? Mostly no. Mostly the classroom is pretty ugly. You got ugly walls, ugly blackboard, ugly chairs, ugly desks, ugly books, probably ugly homework, most likely an ugly teacher and ugly students. And so that's just sad. That's just sort of how it is. So it's too bad the classroom's lagging there. So then you got another question. You got a question as to is it customized? And mostly the answer is very much no. It's not customized. In fact, we don't like customization in the classroom. We greatly prefer, standardization. That's what people demand. They demand standardized tests, standardized books, and which ultimately leads to standardized classes with standardized teachers and standardized students. And there's a weird weird split there, because as much as people demand standardization and turn away customization, when you look at who succeeds out in the world, it's not the standardized students who succeed out in the world. It's the people who really customized their education, who became world experts at one thing that no one else was the expert at. They're the ones who really succeed. So how about sharing in the classroom? Is the classroom a shared experience? And the answer is no, mostly no. Eyes on your own paper, please. Do your own work, and we want you to withhold what you know from the other students around you. It's the rare classroom that really encourages sharing between the students. Well, how about real? I mean, how could a classroom not be real? What does that even mean? Well, I guess ideally, when I talk about real education, what I think of as that meaning is, well, first you have a real teacher, right? And a real teacher would be a real expert at something that they really know about better than anyone else. They're a world-class expert at it, and not only just an expert at the material, but how it relates to the world and how it relates to the students. And usually that's not the case. Usually the teacher kind of knows something about it, doesn't really know how the students are going to be using it. Maybe their knowledge is out of date, in fact, and they end up being kind of a fake teacher. And then the students, it's the same way. Do they really care about what they're learning? Are they here every day to be real students and just dying to learn this? Not so much. Very often they're pretending, they're faking interests. So that's a pretty bad situation when you got fake teacher and fake students. So really, that's all pretty terrible, right? That's not what we want to see. And so, the question comes then, well, what can we do about it? Can it even be changed? And why is it like this? Is it just that, the schools can never change? And we know that schools change. They just change so slowly. So you look at when television was invented in the 1940s. When did television come into the classrooms? Maybe the 1980s. And are we using television wisely in the classrooms today? I don't even think we figured that out yet. So maybe if we wait, technology and these trends will eventually come to the classroom. But it's not clear to me that we can wait, because I think people are going to demand that things be better a little sooner. So let's talk about how we can make these things better. And let's start with the first one, about making things more beautiful. How can you make things more beautiful in the classroom experience? Well, first of all, things don't just become beautiful on their own. Things become beautiful through design. You have to decide that this is what you're going to do, that you're going to make something beautiful. The iPhone did not happen by accident. It happened because Apple decided that having a really beautiful phone would be a very important thing, and they spent a lot of time and energy figuring it out. So what does that mean, a beautiful classroom experience? There's a lot of ways you could look at that, but really what it means is designing the experience so that it can be as good as it can be and engaging and enjoyable as much as it can be. One example I really like is, Professor Lee Sheldon at University of Indiana. He started a very unusual grading procedure, and you'll hear Andrew talk more about this later. His process is, instead of doing the normal averaging system that people do when they're grading a class, instead he has an experience point system. And the way this works is, you start out with 0. Hang on one second. My apologies. Hey. Oh, Donald's sending me texts to my landline. My apologies for that. Anyway, so just pressing on. So Lee has this whole thing set up where he has experience points that sort of level you up through the class, and this has a lot of really powerful benefits to it. And since he's started with this new system, he's found that the students are more engaged, that they are doing more of their homework, grades overall are going up, class engagement is going up, and he's found it just overall to be a better system. But there is something to worry about with these sorts of systems. A lot of people think that, we'll just add incentive systems, reward point systems, and everything will just get better. And very often this is not the case. And there's this excellent book by Alfie Cohen, Punished by Rewards, that talks about how in the majority of cases, using external systems of reward in order to kind of get people excited about doing their classwork leads to making them hate the classwork. And this, of course, is a significant problem. And so this is something we're all going to have to figure out how to navigate. So let me move on to the next part, which is customization. And it's interesting to look at one of the big changes the Internet's brought us is the whole business of the long tail. It used to be there were a small number of books, a small number of songs that you could purchase, a small number of movies you had access to. The Internet's given us access to a tremendous number of these, and these have really changed demand. So Amazon.com, for example, over half the books they sell are not available in normal stores. And so they have a tremendous amount of revenue that was revenue that couldn't have happened before this. And I think we're going to start to see this with education as well. The more customized education can become, the more people are going to be able to find little niches of education. And that seems very important. And when it comes to customizing, what customizing is really about, it's about respecting the learner. So there's a book that I was very influenced by, put together by Mimi Ito, this book called Hanging Out, Messing Around, and Geeking Out. And at Carnegie Mellon, we had the privilege of working on this project with the MacArthur Foundation called U-Media. And the whole idea of U-Media was to solve the problem of kids not learning, how to be digitally creative. And so we created a space very much based on those three principles, which was all about like a cool place where kids could hang out, play video games, listen to music, talk to their friends. But at the same time, we had these mentors there, and the mentors would kind of hang around and watch what the kids were doing. And if they saw they were into something, like somebody was into music, they'd kind of say, hey, I see you're into music. How'd you like to learn to make your own music, or make your own videos, or make your own video games? And gradually kind of leading them in to being kind of creative. And this place has been a tremendous success. But it's only succeeded because we looked very closely at how do teenagers want to learn, and built a system around that. And this leads to something else, an idea I talk about a lot called the curiosity gap. One of the biggest changes the Internet has brought us is the fact that people can now learn about almost anything they want to on their own. They have this incredible access. I remember trying to learn about electronics when I was in junior high school, and it was this huge ordeal. The library had its books were out of date and they weren't helpful. I had to kind of go from teacher to teacher to teacher, and they didn't really have much that was helpful until finally somebody had like an old book they gave me, and it was like I had to work for 6 months just to get started. A kid who wants to learn something about that now types a few keywords, he sees exactly what he needs, spends $5 at Radio Shack, and he can get started like right away. And what this means is that curious people have this insane advantage over everyone else now. And people who are naturally not curious are going to fall way behind, which leads to the possibility that it's the most important thing we can do in a child's education is make them curious. But how do you do that? A surprisingly small amount of study has been done about how does one engender curiosity in other people. And it may turn out this is the most important thing in education. So moving on to the third point, which is sharing. How do you bring sharing into the classroom? Well, simply put, sharing just doesn't happen. You have to create situations that demand it. And this is something we focus on a lot at the Entertainment Technology Center, because at the Entertainment Technology Center, we the way our program works, we bring in about 40% artists, 40% computer scientists, and then we put them together and we try and teach them how to innovate in an interdisciplinary way. How can they build something that they couldn't have built without the others? And so we create classes such as building virtual worlds, where we give them all kinds of crazy technologies, and we put them on these teams where they have a very, very difficult project. So we'll put 4 students together, a computer scientist, a couple artists, a sound designer, and we'll say, you have 2 weeks to build an incredible interactive virtual world. And they have to do it. And the thing is, you've probably been on team projects before where one person carries the day. That's impossible here, because unless everybody brings it to the table and puts all their work together, they're not going to have a complete project. And we very carefully designed the class so that no one can hide. Unless they work together, there's no way to succeed. So we've intentionally created situations that demand sharing. And we often find, it's the teams that are all about communicating are the ones that are going to succeed in this class. The ones that are able to communicate tightly and have a shared vision, they're the ones who succeed. The ones who aren't able to kind of share their work in a meaningful way, they always have huge trouble. So finally, the last point, reality. How do you bring reality into the classroom? And this may be the most difficult one, but I'll cite a couple examples that I've run into that are worth noting. One of them is a program called Animation Mentor, which has become known as possibly one of the best ways to become an expert animator. And the weird thing about Animation Mentor, it's an incredibly exclusive school, it's difficult to get into, and it has no physical location. The way it works is the faculty are scattered all over the country, all over the world, and they are just world-class animators. And the students are similarly scattered. The students work at home. And everything is done via voice conferencing using Skype and other technologies. And so here you have world-class teachers and students who are just dying to get into this program because it's so highly renowned, and they listen to everything that they're told, and they get personal critique on a daily basis from these excellent teachers, and it's a very successful program. Being able to do remote lecturing, I guess I'm doing some right now, is something that is so infrequently used. It's amazing to me how I use it all the time in my classes now. When why should I give a lecture on something when I know someone who's a better expert who doesn't mind spending a half hour talking to my class and answering questions about it? I could get them on a plane and fly them out, but why not just connect to them for real? And why aren't we doing this throughout the rest of throughout the rest of the world, the rest of the educational universe? It's not a technological problem anymore. It's just a habit that people are in. And of course, simulation is something that people often think about. And they often talk about simulations as a replacement for the instructor, or simulations as a method of self-study. But one of the greatest successes I've had with building simulations was working with the New York Fire Department. We were working on a project that was all about trying to train firefighters to deal with hazardous materials situations such as terrorist attacks. And one of the things that the instructors, as we were talking to them, one of the points they really made was, boy, these firefighters hate sitting in lectures because they're very hands-on. That's what they want to do. They want to do something. They don't want to hear about it. And so for that, a simulation seems natural. But the simulation has to seem legitimate to them. And so we created a system where we didn't just come up with some simulation. We let the instructor do it because we found that firefighting techniques are taught differently, very much all the way across the country. Every city has its own methods. And so to come up with one lesson that said, here's how you do it, that simply wasn't going to work. So instead we created a system where the instructor can act as a kind of dungeon master. He sets up a situation, puts the students into it, and he observes them as they go through it. And then when something goes wrong and the students are surprised and they're not sure what to do, and in fact maybe the whole thing does go wrong, somebody dies, at that point the instructor can step in and say, all right, let's talk about what happened. Because this is what instructors want, of course, more than anything else. They want to create that teachable moment in a student. And these firefighting simulations do that very well because, again, they're real students. These are firefighters who train together. If you work together, you train together. And if I let you die in the simulation, what's to say I wouldn't have let you die in real life? So they take it very, very seriously. And so it's a great tool for making teachable moments for them. So, in short, if it's at all possible to make education beautiful and make education customized and to make it shared and to make it real, then we've created a situation where absolutely everybody wins. And that's the end of my talk, really. Now, the horrifying part is I can't hear any of you right now.
Jesse, can you hear this?
So I'm going to hang out here until Donald calls me, and then hopefully I can find a way to kind of interact with you guys. Hello. Hey there. Oh, good. All right. I could hear that. I was worried that maybe we got cut off, but I just went on boldly and just did the whole thing. Yeah, I can. Oh, okay. I mean, if there's a way I could hear Andy's presentation, that'd be great. Otherwise, okay, beautiful. Got it.
As well as several other articles and periodicals. He regularly publishes work exploring collaborative game engines, game engine technology. He maintains a website featuring his works as an educator, artist, programmer, and game addict, and currently teaches courses in multimedia programming, game engine development, 2D and 3D graphics, and information technology theory. And so, welcome, Andy. Good? Good.
Good. All right. Wait a minute. How does this? Spacebar. All right. So, hi. I'm Andy. Oh, yes, I do. Neat. Okay, even better. So there's my appropriate introduction slide. So you can kind of tell a lot from that slide, right? Which was I was in the generation that grew up with games at the end of their fingertips the entire time, which I think is rather telling. So, I kind of wanted to give. Usually, when you give a talk like this, you come in and you talk about what you've done and you know, sort of say this is what we did and what we learned and all of that. But today, I'm going to talk about what we might do. So we don't know what we've learned from it. So in order to do that, I wanted to sort of give a little situational context of exactly where we are as a group with what I'm doing at RIT and all of that kind of stuff. So we have a department now of interactive games and media at RIT. It's a department that houses degrees in game design and development and new media and stuff like that. And it's sort of interesting because this department grew out of a bunch of efforts that all started in the early 2000s, right as the entire rest of the world was saying there was this big national decline in the number of people that were interested in computing. And we were growing like gangbusters. We've grown by about, 4,000% since we started. We planned it around. We planned the original thing about, hey, let's get a handful of students and be able to offer like a section of a course and all of that kind of stuff. I have 21 faculty and a department of what will be about 1,000 students in another year. So that's insane, right? I mean, that's absolutely insane. We're not interested in computing, but that happened, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with this relevance of concrete skills and applicability in a way that it's social impact, right? It's everything that was in the keynote this morning. It's talking about people seeing computing as a tool to do something that they want to do, whatever that might be, right? And I think that's a very important message because somehow along the way we sort of got this notion that technology was for technology's sake. Technology wasn't to do other things with it. And that's a very dangerous notion, I think. So it's a pretty staggering growth curve and all of that. And it still manages to be really competitive. So that's the other thing. When you say you have a big department, people are like, oh, you just don't have standards. You let anybody in, and there you go. We actually only take about 12% of our applicants. And so what's really going on is students are really motivated because they perceive this notion that this is what they want to do, rightly or wrongly. And I'll tell you, a lot of students think they want to be game designers, and then they discover that game design is not very easy, and they decide that maybe they want to be something else. At the same time, they come in and they say, I really want to make games, and I'm really into this stuff. And you say, games are a form of media, and there are other forms of media, and they're all related. And they go, there's other media? So that happens sometimes, right? And so we have a lot of big questions in our curriculum and in our department around, well, what does somebody need to know as a media theorist, as a media scholar, in terms of being able to create these experiences in addition to all of the tech stuff? And then I'm constantly amazed at just exactly how bright they are, exactly how energetic they are, right? I mean, undergraduate students and graduate students make the world go round, right? I mean, we all know this, right? They're just tremendously, wonderfully bright, smart people. A funny thing happened along the way, which is we became a department because you can't have that many students and offer programs like that without kind of the administrative thing to make it all run. And I became a department chair, and somebody said, that's great, your research is over. Awesome. Well planned by myself. So, I started to think about, well, what could I be doing then? So one of the things is when you become a department chair, everybody says to you, well, now you can make things possible for other people, right? And you kind of look at that and go, great. It's kind of like, now you can go to the dentist for other people or something. I mean, it's just awful. And so, I started to think, well, okay, what tools do I have that I can play with here? Well, I have access to all the administrative systems. And I have access to all of the people that make all of the other administrative decisions on campus, right? And I have a whole bunch of faculty that like to do stuff, and generally they like to do stuff that sometimes works in their best interest for tenure and promotion and all that good stuff. And sometimes we get to sit down as a group and sort of set those directions, and the chair sometimes gets involved in setting those directions. So I can't really tell them what to do, but I can at least suggest some interesting things. And sometimes it works. And so we're also coming off, so there's that. So I have this access. So I just want to kind of throw that out there and say, interesting set of tools I didn't have as a regular faculty member. I now have. Plus, we have some interesting experiences that we've been doing. So, and I'm going to talk about a couple of them. One is a Picture the Impossible, which was an augmented reality game for the entire city of Rochester. It had a component in the actual physical printed newspaper. Remember those? Right? And the goal was, we partnered with the newspaper, and the goal was to try to get people to actually look at the newspaper as a thing in their community from which they could actually get news. And so we also had some components in the online site of the newspaper, right? And it's interesting because there's this really weird dichotomy that they're going through, which is their entire business model is, plummeting and tanking and all this. But people were also, it's difficult to get localized community news sometimes when the internet is your news source, right? Or it can be if you don't really know what you're doing and all that kind of stuff. The second thing was to get people to explore the city of Rochester. Rochester's a really interesting place. It has a very rich history. It's been there for a really long time. Lots of things happened, historically with all of that. Susan B. Anthony is buried there. Just little things. So there's this rich history, and a lot of people don't know it, right? And so how can we get them to explore it? So that was a part of the Picture the Impossible game, right? And also, how can we get people kind of engaged in technology and see the connections between different forms of technology? So there was like a texting component, and there was a YouTube thing component, and there was a this and component. But the way the game was played, where there were these different factions, you signed up, and you were on these different factions, and you were competing, right? And so the factions were earning points by doing, exploration tasks or word puzzles or spotting clues in the newspaper or, all this different kind of stuff. And it was kept track on a little leaderboard and all this kind of stuff. And they were competing to raise money for charity. Kind of an interesting thing. And I have a big video about it that if I have time, we'll show at the end. But if not, I'm going to show the shorter of the two. We are also coming off of a system that I built called Muppets with a number of other great people. And so the notion of that was to provide a game-like virtual reality environment for people that were learning introductory programming, because introductory programming is typically where a lot of people decide they don't want to be in computing anymore because of the way we teach it sometimes. And so the notion there was to give them something, so they were creating things where the output of creating those things looked a lot like the things that they were inspired to get into the field in the first place, right? So break down this dichotomy of, someday once you've learned everything, then you'll be able to do what you want to do, and actually take that on and try to gradiate that process out a little bit more. And we've been talking and watching our own students and their engagement in social media systems, right? There is not a student on the RIT campus, I don't think, that is not connected to, Facebook and Twitter and Google all at the same time, doing all of these crazy things and sharing little bits of information. And I actually had the pleasure of watching somebody tweet about my class when they were in my class, and it rang my phone because I was subscribed to their tweet feed, and they were mortified. And that was sort of funny. So we're going to show a video here, and I'm actually going to skip the first one, and I'm going to hope that it works. Maybe? All right. Well, I'm going to go into the folder then and show the video. Ha-ha. So week 7, the task for the Picture the Impossible game was to show a video.
So no fancy video with music. Just straight talk, and hopefully some points for the watch. Before PTI, I knew nothing about source code, except that it looked scary. I thought an egg was something that you ate. I never texted meaningfully. Cell phones are for talking. I never took a photo with my cell phone. Cell phones are for talking. Never participated in the chat room, although I peeked in occasionally. Decided to leave tweeting for the birds. Wouldn't dream of posting on YouTube, and I avoided asking for help whenever it was possible. I had decided that the generation gap was simply too big, and that new technology needed to be left for the younger folk. After joining up in the second week, I thought I would contribute to the watch by doing a few online puzzles, an occasional newspaper crossword. Then I got hooked. Now I look for codes everywhere. I opened a Twitter account. I learned how to locate the source code, although it's still a little scary. I braved 2 scavenger hunts to practice texting and cell phone photography. I hope it's not meaningful that my first scavenger hunt was in a cemetery. If you are seeing this, I even figured out YouTube. I joined Chatterus and participated, giving and receiving help, and it was fun. I should have remembered what I taught my children many years ago. If you want it badly enough, you can learn it. And with a little help from your friends, failure is impossible. Thank you, Susan B. Thanks to PTI for making this opportunity to grow, make friends, and experience anew this wonderful community in which I have studied, worked, and raised a family for 45 years. As I eagerly await round 2 of Picture the Impossible, I will practice Eleanor Roosevelt's advice. Do one thing every day that scares you. Well, maybe not every day, but often. Mom D is ready.
That was easy.
Okay.
All right. So that's a pretty amazing video that she made, right? And so we have tons of these, right? If you type Picture the Impossible into YouTube, there's now, you can see everybody's Week 7 submission, and there were about 3,000 players, so there you go. But that's a really interesting thing that's going on there, right? And so Liz Lawley and a bunch of other folks on the faculty, Eloise Oizon and a bunch of people on the faculty put that game together, and it was just an amazing experience, right? And so we're coming off of that, right? So we learned an awful lot about engineering little experiences like that and making little games to sort of incentivize behaviors. And, we got the president of our university wandering around downtown Rochester with his cell phone, snapping and tagging things, right? There are some beautiful photosynths out there that we took of various historical elements in Rochester and then, did all of that. And they're amazing. The photosynth people actually called us up one day and said, why, what's going on? Because the traffic just spiked on photosynth. So that was sort of fun. So something that we're now starting to talk about is whether or not we should start to do some of this type of work for our student body. So the notion is we have a whole bunch of students that are all going to college, and we track an awful lot of information about them, just the university does. But we could use that university we could use that information and those data sets to actually engineer some shared play experiences around a lot of the tasks that are common to going to college. So some various different notions, right? So one is, our students have portfolios. They make portfolios over the course of their degree. Typically, we introduce them to the concept of a portfolio when they're a freshman, and then along about their senior year, we say, hey, how is your portfolio going? It's about time to have portfolio review. And they don't do a great job of staying on task and all that kind of stuff. And if you've ever, if you're the kind of person that doesn't stay on task well, out of your own sort of organizational habit, you may find that you sometimes like to get, some way of tracking that, some way of, being reminded to do that every so often, right? And so you just set up an Outlook reminder and you're done. Outlook reminders. It's much more compelling when I can get points every week on my Xbox Live Arcade thing than it is Outlook reminder. So that's the notion. Should we do that? Are we interested in doing that? Should we do it in elements of our actual curriculum? Should we only do it in extracurricular activities? Should we only do it for sort of mundane things that the university makes us do anyway? What do we want to do? We're not sure yet, but here are some things that we're thinking about. So campus is a closed system, but it isn't, but it is, right? So we like to think of it still as a closed system. We like to think that we can do things in the university and they stay within the walls of the university, and that there's a lot of data that we have about our students and that stays within the walls of the university. So it's a closed system, right? We have their social security numbers and all this other kind of stuff and tie it into meal plans, and they can, they have cards and, they can buy things and all that kind of stuff. But it's not a closed system, right? Somebody tweets about your class, that's not closed, right? So we have some real informational, organizational, public, private kind of messes going on, right? And how do we deal with that? Off-campus social software systems can have large-scale consequences on campus. Facebook is obvious, right? We all know that our students are connected to Facebook and doing all of that. Foursquare was interesting. So we have this historical problem at RIT. I don't know if any other institutions have this, where our freshmen sit in their dorm rooms. They don't explore the campus. They don't explore the campus until you actually create an activity that forces them to explore the campus. And if you talk to anybody in like campus orientation and all that kind of stuff, this happens at campuses all over the place. They show up at 3 a.m. and drag them out to play, Frisbee or something so that they actually see the quad and, all this kind of stuff. And, I used to give, crazy things like, run out, find me the 3 cheapest things that you can buy at 3 a.m. When you're hungry. And so that would force them to go to other things than just the cafeteria that was right next to their room, this sort of thing. Foursquare changed that because now students are competing on campus to check in to all the different buildings on Foursquare. Okay? And so the notion here, really, college is in certain respects a game, but not in others. This is not unnoted by our current student body, who created things like the Wii course registration system, where you can use the Wii controller to select your classes, right? I mean, that's fantastic, right? Because it's so arbitrary anyway, right? Somebody wrote a quest guide to the department that is written in like the WoW quest style. So you start off and there's, a student with a little question mark and, all this kind of stuff. So, it basically says take the courses from this faculty member instead of that faculty member if you want to optimize for this or that. And, here are the skill trees of all the faculty. I mean, it's just absolutely hilarious, right? But it's sort of an interesting take on exactly, what they're doing. This one gets a little more interesting. So I've been talking to a lot of our undergraduate students, and our undergraduate students are very concerned about having a record of their activities because they want to be able to represent what they've been doing to somebody else, right? And digital systems have a neat way of doing that, right? But of course, they want to engineer what the record looks like, right? Grades are a record. They're a very poor record, but they're a record, right? I mean, most educators agree that, grades are sort of ugly as an assessment metric. I mean, they're very coarse and they don't really define anything, right? So our students are studying game design, which is a meta-reflection and analysis of a lot of these topics. So if we're going to build any of this stuff, our students are going to build it for our students, which is sort of an interesting little cycle. So the notion is, what if we create a system where students could play a game / earn achievements by doing various tasks in relationship to the program, the campus, the student body, so on, right? We could incentivize a lot of interesting things, right? And a lot of people are talking about this right now. They're talking about achievement systems and whether or not those are effective and all this kind of stuff. But there's some really, really big dangers with this, right? Huge educational dangers with this. So we started looking at, so if you want to design an achievement system, what does that look like? And so we went out, and there's a lot written about it, actually, from the game design community, and this was a nice one that was about the congregate system of achievement systems. And, there's 14 happy little rules of building achievement systems. 14, right? So, you think it's really easy. You're sitting there playing your game, and ding, achievement, and okay. Turns out it's really hard to do right. And if you make them wrong, then you make people angry. But what's interesting is they don't just get angry at the achievement system, they get angry at the game and the platform that the game is running on and all of that. So you can really mess up here pretty quickly, pretty badly. So, the first thing is, why is this hard and why is that fun? Grindy achievements are not so great unless they overlap with natural behavior, right? If you get an achievement for every great blade of grass that you pluck, then somebody's going to crawl around on their hands and knees and mow your yard, right? And that's not very fun. So you got to really think about exactly what you're doing in terms of design space there. And so there's a bunch of these. And so go out, read the article. It's a lot of fun to sort of look at different ways that can be optimized. This is a big one, though. Right? What happens to unattainable achievements? What happens to the fact that if it's in a linear fashion and you just walked right by it and you're trying to do one of these things and now you realize, hey, I can't do that and I'll never be able to do it. And that's a big problem in educational design, right? I mean, we know that doesn't work out well in a class and it doesn't work out well for any of this stuff. So that's kind of a humdinger. And then we read this, right? Okay. So, this is a great book, and it was mentioned in the last talk. And a lot of this is, the ability of arbitrary reward systems to effectively destroy what you're trying to achieve in the first place, which is education, right, and engagement. And so, a concern for this experiment, but also just the general ways we evaluate students, right? And, at least the faculty in my department are pretty unanimous in, not thinking that grades is a really great measure of how much somebody learned about a given topic in a given course and all of that, but there's some pretty severe institutional and societal pressures around that as well. Little things like accreditation and whatnot. So the notion of designing rewards in games is often multifaceted, right? And so, we started to think about rewards. And so you can have very arbitrary rewards. You can have things like points, right? And I actually know a professor once that structured his course on a 50,000 point scale, right? So if you had whatever, above 45,000, then you got an A or something absurd. So students would come in to argue with him over, a point on the test or something, and he'd say, fine, I'll give you 100 points. And then they caught on pretty quick. But it was sort of interesting that it can be exactly that arbitrary, right? But there are other things that are less arbitrary that go into game design, that go into reward structures in game design. Things like completeness can have a really powerful pull towards people. Right? And a lot of it is the feedback that you're getting on one of these things. So there are certain players that are motivated by exploration. So you give them a map, and you make most of it dark, and you say, you are here. And then you let them walk around a little bit, and all of a sudden a little new area lights up. Remember that thing with the Foursquare thing? Yeah. Right? That's a part of it. Right? So things like completeness, right? New areas, rewards such as narrative rewards and emotional rewards, right? Spelling tests. So, you got a gold sticker on your spelling test. That's pretty arbitrary. What does a gold sticker have to do with spelling? Nothing, right? You spell all the words right, you get a new, harder word. That's a different kind of reward. A little more interesting, right? Ken's slide, and Ken's here. Excellent, right? So this comes out of Ken's work. Ken's sitting right there. From the Games for Learning Institute, and is based around the notion of Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow, which is basically saying, you got boredom over here if the things are too easy, and you've got frustration over there if things are too hard, but you're constantly, wiggling up this slope, this ever-changing slope of it being just right? You're feeling challenged, but you're also being rewarded for solving something, right? And it's not unnoted to me that there's a carrot in the slide. Right? And so in the irony of ironies, the element that is often misrepresented as game addiction is the very same element that is portrayed as, I know, funny, curiosity and challenge, right? So we want to play these games through like this, right? They're so addicting because we're solving challenges, and we like solving challenges, right? Human beings are happy solving challenges and feeling rewarded was the way a lot of people condense that down. But the feeling rewarded is part of it, right? But it has to be an intrinsic reward. It can't be an arbitrary reward. Okay? So we have some agreed upon things here, right? We should adhere to everything we understand about best practice, both as educators and as game designers, with what we're going to do. Nothing we do should impact any of the actual curriculum. This is an experiment, right? You don't just change everything without, right? Students should be involved in the design of whatever we do and engage with it as research. We actually want to know, does this do anything, right? We don't just want to try it and then, kind of fudge afterwards and go, well, we think it worked because everybody had a really good time. We want to drill down there, figure out what the research questions are, all of that. Anything we do should be optional, right? We don't have the right. We've had some big discussions about this in terms of the department, and we don't feel we have the right to take a student and say, you have to do this. But we think a lot of them will want to do this, whatever this happens to be. And we've got some support, right? We know that campus is essentially a giant technology system, and there's user roles in systems and stuff all over the place. And we know that a lot of the things that we want to do are possible and plausible with some really big concerns about behavior and privacy and all the rest of it, right? Anybody in here play World of Warcraft? Anybody in here post on the forums for World of Warcraft? Right? They just had a little to do with the fact that they said that you can no longer post on the World of Warcraft forums unless you use your real name. Which is really causing quite a stir, as you might imagine, because those are not shielded from the crawlers, which means if you Google it, you can now figure out who in real life is posting on the World of Warcraft forums. We have support from academic affairs, right, which is a biggie because you can't really move anything in a university unless you have support from academic affairs. We have support of departmental staff and faculty and some of our students that we've been able to engage in this process so far. And maybe some interest from our friends and colleagues in both academia and the corporate world. So it may be that other universities want to get in with us on this. It may be that some corporations want to get in with what we're doing and see how they can be involved. We don't really know what we're going to learn. So open, honest admission. But we're going to try something in this space. And I think it's going to be a really interesting year. So that's what I came to talk about. And hopefully Jesse's still around and we can do questions and comments. Or I'd love to hear what, maybe you think I'm insane. That's cool too. Yeah. So that's kind of where it is. And it looks like we have just a tiny bit of time, so I am going to show that other video just to give you a better sense of what that picture of the impossible thing was all about. I just wasn't sure if we were going to have time.
By the time it was said and done, we had 2,496 players. It meant everything to have that many people in the game.
The Democrat Chronicle and RIT said, we want to do something together. We want to do an experiment that allows us to try new things, to bring the community together.
The Picture of the Impossible is an alternate reality and community interaction game where we encourage people in Rochester to learn more about innovation, history, and participate in very innovative and inventive tasks.
The idea of using the paper as a starting point for the game and having people really get connected to the tangible aspects of the paper and of the community was a lot of what was interesting to us. There are lots of web-based games out there, but there are not a lot that really leverage the kind of strengths that a newspaper brings to the project.
We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. We thought, we'll develop a game, we'll put it out there, and we'll let people play it, and then we'll measure their engagement and their response. It turned out to be a lot more than that, partly because so many people in the community got on board and decided to participate.
What made it so new was that we didn't really take things, we took little pieces here and there, but we didn't really model it after anything. We sort of let our process kind of define what it became, and it became a lot of different things. It wasn't just out in the community, it wasn't just on the web, it was all over the place.
To play the game, you could go online and just do puzzles. And every single day of the week there was a different puzzle. Additionally, the DNC provided puzzles through the newspaper. There were local challenges. So on Wednesday, you had to put pictures together from several different sectors of the city, and people got in forums and cooperated with other people from different sections of the city, which is amazing.
I love jigsaw puzzles, and that was really fun, and they were easy for me, and I thought, okay, well, I can do this. And pretty soon I was hooked.
We also tied each of the factions to a local charity so that you could join because you liked the description of it, that, the watch is always watching for injustice kind of thing, or you could join because the watch was supporting Wilson Commencement Park, or because the trees were supporting Golisano Children's Hospital, or the forge was supporting Food Link.
Different members of a faction would go work together. The scavenger hunts were often team efforts. People would say, hey, One of the scavenger hunts was to go to the Mount Hope Cemetery. So maybe 5, 6, 7 people would say, hey, let's all meet there and let's do this all together.
In the beginning, I thought it would be pretty casual, go out, do a couple scavenger hunts here and there. I didn't realize by the 5th or 6th week how intense it was going to get. I found myself checking the website multiple times a day. I'd sign in at school, do some games. I'd come home, check the leaderboards.
The response was immense. People were wildly excited. They were very engaged. They loved it. It got them out of the house.
We knew that it would help bring the community together because everybody was playing for the same cause. What we didn't know was that they would meet up with each other so often like they did, especially towards the end when the puzzles started to get a lot harder.
At the end of 7 weeks, we had not had one instance of negativity or meanness in any of the forums. We hadn't had to moderate a single comment. So that's pretty extraordinary that we built that kind of, not just a community, but a really positive, supportive, collaborative community.
The average monthly unique visitor was on there 62 minutes, so more than an hour per unique visitor, monthly unique visitor.
If you were the first one to finish the puzzles for that day, you'd be number one, so that always, I wanted to do the puzzles right at midnight when they became available. Unfortunately, I lost a lot of sleep doing that, but...
You had to score in the top 150 of the contestants to get an invitation to the gala. Either that or win one of the big weekly prizes, which I didn't have a prayer of doing.
It never in a million years occurred to us that there would be 14 people who would get every single point available in the game, which says a lot about the dedication of some of these players.
Rock deal.
Rock deals, yeah.
Well, that's what
That was my downfall.
He's got every point possible except on rock deals. He hit one thing wrong.
Yeah. I could have swore I clicked the right button.
So thrilled that so many members of our community got a chance to play this game and learn a little bit more about our community as a result. Rebecca was the obsessed one in our couple. I'm sure most of you had one or more obsessed people in your groups.
It was really cool to have some of my work actually out and playable by people, something that was real and not just for class, and interacting with the different users in the forum and solving problems for them, like if they had difficulty with the game or answering questions. It was just great.
The headline in the November 1st edition of the Democrat and Chronicle summed it up for me. Anything's possible. That's how we ended it. Anything's possible.
I'm sure if they do it again next year, we'll be ready for it.
So, in the interest of full disclosure, I should point out that Microsoft did sponsor a portion of that game, so thanks. All right. I have no idea how Q&A is going to work, but Don's here to make it happen.
I've got an idea. So I think we'll take some questions. Let me make sure Andy's still here. Andy, are you here, Andy?
That's Jesse.
Or Jesse, are you here, Jesse? Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Yes, I am here. Sorry, I had to mute it.
Oh, no problem. All right, Jesse's here. Let's see if we can get you on the main overhead again.
Alrighty.
Are you sharing your voice?
I'm sharing the video, and now I'm sharing the voice.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to see if anyone has some questions, and I'm going to bring the phone over so that Jesse can hear your question, and then we can all hear his answer. So I see one here. Yes, Ken.
Yeah, it's actually, hi, Jesse.
Hi.
This is weird.
Yeah. Or maybe it's the future.
Yeah, maybe this is the weird future. Yeah. So I just want, this isn't a question, this is more a comment. Thanks for showing that diagram of the cool guy on the rocket ship. But I wanted to just clarify, that's part of a sequence of images, and the point of it is that the carrot is just an excuse. The learning happens because of the upward velocity, which is the internal change in the mind of the player as they're mastering new concepts. So that was actually the principle and how it ties in with Csikszentmihalyi.
No, that's exactly right. And I think the thing that's interesting there is a lot of the thing that we're thinking about now is that the carrot can start out as, or often in these systems, the carrot starts out as somewhat arbitrary, but the best carrots are the ones that actually carry you forward up the ladder, right? So like the note, like the thing with the harder word as the result of the spelling test, right? So it's intrinsic into the climb, right, as opposed to arbitrary separation. So, yep.
Jesse, you have anything to say to that?
Nope.
Questions? All right, you got me back here. There you go.
Jesse, I've got a question for you about your notion of tapping into experts to make things in classrooms real. And,
sure.
And the question is, I don't see how that scales. I mean, that's great that you can call up a friend to be part of your class at Carnegie Mellon, but if any expert starts getting, lots of calls from East Nowhere State University, it just doesn't work. And I'm not sure. I think this is why people write books. If you're an expert and you can bring something to the party that way and help people teach a class a certain way, that's a scalable solution. But I just don't see how what you're proposing could be.
Well, and I guess what I'm arguing is that when you think about the top experts that everyone's going to want to hear from, I totally agree. Right? That is why they write books, and that is why they do lecture circuits. What I'm talking about is the long tail of experts for incredibly customized kinds of education. When people have a very specific thing that they want to learn about, then very often there is some individual who has something meaningful to say on it. Even just to the point of having one class kind of connect up with another class that's maybe doing something in a similar vein, but has done a very different set of projects. And sort of using the distance to be able to have, say, I don't know, one of the star students at some distant class kind of say, yeah, here's how I built this thing and here's why I did it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I have a question for you guys, actually. I'm curious, you touched on it, Andy, about the questions of privacy. And with the access to student information systems within universities, there's a tremendous amount of data that's there that can be used to fuel all kinds of applications. And one thing I've seen in talking to people about these sorts of ideas, they say, well, we can't expose this. We can't have a leaderboard because that's so exposing students' performance, and there's all stuff that should be very private to them. And what always strikes me as strange with that is that I think that exposing students in a competitive atmosphere is actually really integral to a lot of traditional kind of pen and paper teaching techniques. Like I remember someone I worked with in the education product group talked about how in her third grade classroom they had a teacher had paper plates and would hang them on the wall, and every time a student did well, they'd tape a piece of candy to the paper plate. And then at the end of the semester, the students would get there. So they got to see how much candy all the other students had, and then they got their candy at the end. And I mean, just have you encountered that kind of resistance? And what's your answer to those questions of privacy?
Well, I think the first thing is, obviously students today are getting forcibly more savvy about what they choose to expose and understanding that they need to manage some of that process. I mean, I can, even just a few years ago, people were coming and saying, well, it doesn't matter what I put on Facebook. It's just, it's me and my friends hanging out. And now there's enough horror stories that they're starting to understand that the internet is big and it doesn't go away and, all of that kind of stuff. So it is something that, we're starting to see a shift there. So I think that, allowing students participation in the process of what they choose to share and what they don't choose to share is pretty critical. I think there's another in the question as you posed it, though, there's another really interesting thing, which is this notion of competition. So some people are very motivated by competition. Some people really aren't. And some people will actively avoid competition in any context, regardless of, anything else. And so you want to find ways where different people can be motivated. People are different. And so some people are motivated by X and other people by Y. And so you got to be really conscious of that. And I think it's interesting that, we can't make a leaderboard out of SIS, but we have a dean's list, right? And we don't even give people the option of opting out of the dean's list, right? So there's some really weird parallels that go on.
No, and without a doubt, this whole business of privacy and how it relates to school achievement is definitely an obstacle with some of these systems. And I think for some of them, opt in, opt out is a possibility. But other systems, it's not necessarily an option. But I guess in short, I think the time is here for people to kind of be creative and find ways they can kind of break the rules. There's no point in breaking the rules with these things if they don't work. But if we can prove they do work, well, then the rules need to change.
There's a lot going on in education circles about shifting the paradigm away from teaching-centric approaches to learning-centric approaches, and I think we're talking about different learning styles here and things like Howard Gardner and the kinds of online projects that are being worked on under his auspices can be referenced here. But I think what's really important to note is the degree to which the social networks penetrate into other aspects of everyday life. So we think of these segregated experiences in the classroom or in the dorm room or at work, and we have the opportunity to leverage these social networks in a way that speaks across those different segregated experiences. And I think things like the portfolio model that you're proposing, which could potentially not just encompass the career of the student while they're there, but even precede their career and follow up, would be important ways of responding to those changing circumstances.
Questions? Yes.
So this question is for Andy. Thanks, first off, for the presentation. I just wanted to ask about your program. You said you had about 1,000 students. Can you tell me what the gender composition is of your students?
Yeah, I can actually tell you a little story about that. So we have two programs. We have a game design and development program, and we have a new media interactive development program. Game design and development is about 20% or so women. New media interactive development is about 35% women, which kind of blows in terms of where we would like to be. It's partly partly the perception of the field. Although I remember when we originally proposed the games degree, we were told that we were going to get no higher than 5% women, which is interesting. And yet, and a lot of that goes back to, at that time, people were sort of running around defining gameplay as first-person shooter, right? Which is really a very, pretty small segment of the overall market. But a lot of that has changed. Part of it is still the national pipeline problem, right? I mean, a lot of what we're teaching in those programs is dependent on, the math, science, physics, combination, and a lot of the research tends to be focused on the big dropout in 6th to 8th grade, which is where there's a lot of this dichotomy seems to flow out. So that's something that we're looking at. I mean, we're trying to do outreach programs and all the rest of it. We partnered with the Girl Scouts to do a Games for Girl Scouts kind of thing and all of that. But it's it's a slow road. So we're where we're at, and we're trying to improve it.
One small point about that, sorry, is just that while there may be at graduation, girls and boys are about equal in terms of their
No, it's they're qualified, but do they want to? Are they interested? Right? Where does that interest lie? Right? And so, we were told when we started out that NULL, girls were just not interested in making games, right? Which I don't think is true. But it was sort of an interesting thing to be faced with as you're proposing a new degree.
Jesse, would you like to comment on that?
I don't think I have too much to add there.
Okay. Another question over here.
Hi, this is basically a question for Jesse, although first I want to make a comment. It was fascinating to me at the plenary session that it was proudly announced that 70 of the 300-odd participants here were women. In most fields, that wouldn't be so proudly announced. That would be, a small number. The question I have is, where do you find the faculty who are willing to do the sort of problem-based group teaching? Especially, where do you find them in the context of a curriculum? So actually, I can imagine doing problem-based group teaching of or learning of differential equations. And in fact, that would, if you're doing things in the context of the curriculum, the university is going to be much more happy about it than if this teaching of curiosity is just something extra. But how do you find people who are willing to work that hard at thinking about teaching, at least in the university context?
So the faculty for the Entertainment Technology Center is an unusual faculty. We are not a department in the traditional way. We're a multidisciplinary center that was created jointly by the School of Fine Arts and the School of Computer Science. And we report directly to the provost. We don't report through either of the departments because it was understood that if we reported through either of those departments, it would unduly sway us away from our interdisciplinary mission. So I guess in short, we've had to find unusual faculty who are interested primarily in teaching this specifically, teaching people how to invent out in the real world. We have a mixture of faculty who are some of them are from the dramatic arts, some of them are from the world of theme park design, some of them are musicians, some are artists, but all of them are focused on how does a team of people make something great. So it's an unusual kind of cast of faculty, and we're not, we break the mold a little bit in terms of your typical department.
Yeah, and just to sort of tag onto that, I mean, I don't think it's an accident that, like the IGM department, we specifically made a department that wasn't a department of anything else. And of the 21 people in it, no more than 2 people have their degree in the same thing. So it very much breaks that sort of standard academic mold in that sense.
So I used to be a provost, and it's exactly that problem. It's that we can create terrific interdisciplinary programs and get the right people to do them, but I want to scale it up so we teach lots of things this way, and I don't know how to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm Wolfgang Gensch. So as an example, in Germany, we have still the challenge that over 50% of the teachers are beyond 50. And you know what I mean when I say that. No, I mean, and I'm far beyond 50, so that's okay. And on the other hand, the teacher is still, in my opinion, the most important middleman or middlewoman who have to be included in such a modernization process also. I don't know of any project in Europe which really focuses on that specific aspect. Do you have any idea of this in the US? There is something where the teacher is really actively and creatively involved in these things. So the problem in Europe is the governments and the distributed responsibilities of education. For example, in Germany, in 16 different states, we have at least 16 different education systems. So It's just a hard one, I guess. I'm sorry.
All right. Have you thought about in terms of teacher training? I mean, you talked about an opt-in model, and I think that's kind of what you're getting at is this question of how do we deal with a very diverse teacher population? How do we get them to opt in to playing these games?
I haven't been thinking about that an awful lot.
Okay, we got nothing. Oh, wait. Gentry, do you have an answer or a question? All right, we got...
So the kind of lesson learned at the end of the game was that anything was possible. And I'm thinking, and I know very little bit about game design, but it seems to me that if anything is possible, that one of them would be a surprise, right? And sometimes I would imagine, at least in technology, a surprise also equals a glitch, right, or a crash. So I'm wondering if you could speak maybe just through an example of what was the biggest surprise in the game, something that wasn't anticipated, something that wasn't built into the design.
The whole Picture the Impossible experience was a crash course educational system of how to deal with crisis, essentially. It was held together with duct tape and shoestrings. We didn't anticipate that it was going to be that big. We didn't anticipate that there were going to be all kinds of issues, just with the technical infrastructure between us and the newspaper and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, it was just behind the scenes. It was just an absolute nightmare. But what you learn is that it's very much like teaching a course, which is, the players are going to be there every week, and you've got to have your stuff out there and ready to go, and you've got to, react, right? And you've just got to totally focus down on exactly what's going on during the lifespan of that experience. That was sort of the thing. I think that, like what I'm reading now is I'm starting to read an awful lot about, game rewards and achievements and metrics and all this other kind of stuff, and some, real horror stories from the commercial field about, we designed this mechanic to do this, and we thought that players would respond to it like this, but the single thing is that game players will optimize out what is the best mechanic, right? What gets them the maximal reward. That's the gaming culture. And so if you put something in there where, you're expecting, it's like in early MMO design, you had, people were going to wander all around the world and, do all this kind of stuff and, see all this great stuff and all this, but you put really good rewards on this one guy. So people would just kill that one guy and take the reward and then wait for him to reappear and kill him again and take the reward and do that over and over again, right? So nobody anticipated that the first time through. So I'm starting to read an awful lot about, those sorts of things. What can you anticipate and then what can you reasonably react to and tweak, after the fact, right? But you don't want to tweak too much after the fact. You wind up nerfing your own achievement system. It'd be strange.
So we're at the end of our time. So I thank everyone for coming. It was great to see so many people interested in this topic. If you have more questions, I hope that you talk to Andy or find Jesse some way or another and keep the conversation going. If you're interested in this area, please come talk to me about it because I am definitely very interested in this area and I'm hoping to see a lot of progress made in the next couple of years. So thank you, everyone.